Welcome to Solly
Gauta
UNCUT. So, dear South Africans, what is this platform about? Well, it's an uncensored space for all of us to have really serious conversations about South Africa.
Politics is a very confusing subject, more so in South Africa, with the demagoguery, the rhetoric, the lies, the obfuscation. UNCUT is the platform where in-depth political analysis is going to be hosted.
So we decided that for this episode 1, we'll discuss the role that President Ramaphosa has and the power, especially the power that he has, that he can exert on his African National Congress to stamp out corruption.
We need to root out corruption from the face of South Africa. We need to do that. My brother Felix says, what are we going to do with the tender system? Yes, it is the tender system that has led us in large measure to where we are. We're looking very closely at it. We've got a number of options of how best we can deal with the tender system with a view of eradicating corruption.
There clearly will be prosecutions, and some people will end up going to jail and go and wear orange overalls.
Many leaders of the ANC, past and present, have done business with government whilst they were leaders of the African National Congress.
I see my task as uniting the ANC. I'll give you a good example. Before President Zuma resigned, there were those who were saying, "You are a weak president. Why haven't you kicked President Zuma out? Why haven't you dealt with him?" And I said I would rather be seen as the weak president than to split the ANC. Because that is not my mission. My mission is to keep the ANC united.
So, Gauta, what do you think?
Cyril Ramaphosa is the leader of the African National Congress. He has said so many times that his job description is to unite the African National Congress. So he's an ANC man through and through. He embodies its values, whatever they are this time. Whatever he does, he approves of it, because he's never condemned the misdeeds of the African National Congress, especially the corruption. The C word is very rare on his lips. He seems to be too shy to condemn corruption as it happens in the African National Congress.
Well, Gauta, I differ with you a little bit there. I think he does condemn the thing, but the thing is, everybody has come to understand that his condemnations don't mean anything. So nobody takes him seriously. Nobody is afraid of him. He says these things. He's always ready to say the beautiful things that everybody wants to hear. Corruption is wrong. We're going to go after it, no matter where it sits. But look, he's been in power for 2 years now. Let's face it. Is he really meaning it each time he condemns corruption? Especially maybe where he's silent, and I'll agree with you, is when it comes to corruption at the levels where he sits, like the Secretary General of the ANC and other people in the NEC. Some of whom have also been redeployed into government. He doesn't say anything about those people.
President Ramaphosa, as president of the African National Congress, is sitting in the NEC, in the NWC, and in cabinet with leaders who have been fingered in serious graft in this country. All of them, from the chairman of the African National Congress, Gwede Mantashe, the Secretary General of the ANC, Magashule, who has been fingered in the Estina Diary scandal, the cabinet ministers, deputy ministers from the Zuma era, David Mahlobos, and the whole shoot of them have been involved or have been fingered by different forums like the Public Protector, the Auditor General. Now, if he were a serious leader of the most important political party in Africa, the African National Congress, he ought to have introduced some political reforms which impacted on the corruption in the African National Congress. Just to illustrate, the ANC has never produced one single discussion document about corruption in its ranks. Yet in its conference documents, it does mention the fact that the ANC is involved in corruption, in vote rigging, vote buying, manipulation of membership lists. But since it took over, there is no program aimed at the transformation and the cleansing of the African National Congress. And he sits, as I say, in the NEC and in cabinet with very senior people of ANC who have been fingered in corruption.
You know, there was recently a discussion, I don't know if you recall, where apparently there was an attempt to talk about corruption, about uprooting or outrooting corruption within the ANC. And then suddenly everybody stood up and was pointing fingers at everybody else. So it was a whole session of whataboutism. And that is a problem we're sitting with at South Africa, because nobody, including the president, has a moral high ground they need in order to stand up and look at everybody else and say, guys, stop it. Now, when the commander-in-chief lacks that moral high ground to look at everybody else and tell them to stop, who else is going to do it? We know for sure that it's not the gentleman from the Free State. It's not going to happen. Okay? It's not going to be done by the chairman of the ANC. It's not going to be done by the Secretary General of the ANC. And the people sitting on the ground, on the so-called ground in branches, many of them are waiting for their turns to eat. So it comes back to our question, does he really have the power and the will, perhaps, to stamp out corruption out of the African National Congress, therefore out of South Africa? Because look, the African National Congress is the makulubas of South African politics. When it coughs, the whole country catches a cold. So we really, really need to find other ways. And perhaps the solutions we seek are no longer in the African National Congress. That is a discussion that South Africans have to engage with, frankly. And I know that some of our listeners are going to be asking us, then whom do we vote for? And my answer to that is that people must stop voting, looking for love in politics. You don't look for love in politics. You have to look to vote like a chess player. In other words, you have to look at how the power is dispersed within our political field. And if there's too much power in any one side, you have to take out some of it away and take it to the other side so that nobody can make decisions unilaterally for this country. Right now, with too much power concentrated in the African National Congress, there's nothing we can do. When they decide that we're not going to have beer anymore for the next week, then there's not going to be beer for the next week. If they decide that restaurants must shut down every Sunday because it's a worship day, it's going to happen because they have that power. But if we take some of that power away from them and give it to other parties, then they have to negotiate with other parties. And I think that's the discussion that we need to have.
You hit the nail on the head in the beginning there when you said the president creates the environment in which corruption takes place because of his silence. He rarely speaks about corruption. He only started speaking about corruption now when the IMF loan was approved. Now, the second question that arises from what you have just said is whether there is possibility for change to happen in the politics, especially the situation of corruption in South Africa, through elections. I'm going to disappoint you. The elections in this country are rigged. Elections are rigged. It's not possible at the moment to wrestle power away from the ANC, because especially the African National Congress controls the budgets from which they steal the money for campaigning, and they are able to buy opposition parties, like we have seen in Johannesburg, in Tshwane, and in other smaller municipalities where the ANC was supposed to have lost the vote. Now, part of the problem lies with the lack of sophistication of our voters and the sentimentality of some of the bulk of the voting public there. So that mixture of lack of sophistication on the side of voters, as well as the power of incumbency of the African National Congress makes it very difficult at the moment for elections to be the deciding factor and the tool to remove the ANC. People are talking about the possibility of civil society movements, social movements coming up to mobilize the people to ensure that they participate meaningfully, not just as voting cattle, but as informed voters, which is not yet the situation right now because of that sentimentality, the power of incumbency, and so on. Now, social movements will take time to grow and make a dent in the politics of the country by empowering the masses to think for themselves, to take charge of their destiny, and be able to hold a politician's to account. So it is a very difficult situation, but we can do it as South Africans.
I think that while we are able to wear colorful t-shirts and caps and carry placards and go into the streets, appear in newspaper columns or on TV, protesting, making noise, shouting out for the ANC to stop corruption, that is not how things are going to be changed in South Africa. I really truly believe that the only way that things can change is for a party, a different party, whether it's a social movement or a new political party, it must go into the system. It must be supported by as many South Africans as possible, so that once it's in the system, it's then able to drive systemic changes that are needed. There's no way that we can get the changes that we need while the power, for instance, the ANC, which is the power, the Makulu bars of our politics, as I said earlier, controls who gets appointed to be the chief electoral officer, the deputy chief electoral officer, and other senior executive in the electoral body. So the independent electoral commission is not really as independent as many people would like to believe. All right? There are too many powers that are still vested in the presidency. Those powers have not been changed ever since Zuma left. So anyone can come in there and go rogue on us. We need to have systemic changes. We need to change the way things are done. We need to change to put more checks and balances in the powers that exist in the presidency and elsewhere. I mean, the president can decide who becomes the public protector, who becomes the NDPP, who becomes, so all of these Chapter 9 institutions are reliant on the power of Luthuli House. It cannot be right. We've tried this system for 26 years. Okay, and the only way to change the way things are run in South Africa sustainably for the forever is for a very strong political force to go into the system and push for those changes from within. Otherwise, we're going to be fighting a forever war of opposition against the ANC. The ANC wasn't designed, or our new order, as it were, a post-apartheid order, was not designed to be a one-party state forever. And that's what it is now. And you can't change it while the ANC lords it over our affairs, without another force in there in the parliament pushing it to not make many of the silly decisions that it's taken. So we need to balance, we need to take away some of the power that's in the ANC. We need to put people in there, men and women out there, who will look at the constitution and the interests of all the people of South Africa, united in our democracy, in our diversity, to guide their action. And that's not the case right now with the forces that we have in parliament. That is a problem.
Well, friends, that's all we had for today. Please be part of this conversation by clicking on the red button and subscribing to our channel.
It was an awesome discussion. I look forward to the next one. I hope to see more of you telling us what you think about this on our Twitter handle @Solly Gauta. Till next time.